Hi, I'm Jason with Radiant Places and Properties, and we're here today with Zach Ryan, who's going to help us understand how you value a piece of property. So Zach, what's the first thing you look for on a piece of property?
Jason, I think by virtue of just driving to the property, you end up falling into the situation of the answer being location, location, location. You end up having to deal with and address how you got there, how long it took to get there, how you traveled there, what route you took, and what the surroundings are once you get there. So
something tied to location that we've talked about in some of our other videos is access. So how would that impact the value of a piece of property?
Absolutely, access is important, and again, it impacts the type of market participant that will be interested in that property, and it has a bearing on its overall use potential. Access can determine developability.
Right.
If it's a 25-foot wide private ingress-egress easement, then in most areas that under zoning guidelines and land use guidelines, you would not be able to subdivide that piece of property, in some areas.
Right.
So access is absolutely key. Having legal access is key. Having road access
Right.
versus boat access for an island, or so yes, absolutely, access is very important.
Okay.
And factors into the marketability and the appeal
Great.
of any given piece of property.
Well, something you touched on a little bit was kind of the availability for utilities, or the access, or perhaps an easement. If you're looking to develop a piece of property, there are certain requirements. So when you're appraising a piece of property, are utilities something that you look very closely at?
Yes. Yeah. Are they even available in the general area, and which utilities are available? And that would be very important to help distinguish a development tract from a non-development tract. Although you could, if you're in an area that does not have full services such as public water and public sewer, it's still an option to install those types of improvements within the property itself. But typically, you would want those to be municipal services that could be extended to the property. So availability of utilities is very important, and can they be extended into the property? And again, if you had a property that was accessed only by easement, and that easement was only for ingress-egress purposes and did not include the right to extend utilities, then that would be a consideration in valuing the property.
Right.
Because then someone might have to operate their property from a generator until they remedy that situation. So yes.
Right. Well, something else we don't deal a lot with here in Florida, but may be concerned in other locations as you get further north, is topography and the way a land just lays out. Is that something that you also consider?
Topography and layout and configuration are all important considerations. And we don't have the same topographical characteristics here in Florida that you might have in areas further north, but nonetheless we have topographical features here that do have a bearing on a property's appeal and use potential. We certainly have our share of low-lying areas, and so that has a bearing on the property's use potential, and can either positively or negatively impact the marketability of a particular tract, depending on what the characteristics of that low-lying area are. Are they just a bog muck swamp that
Right.
you can't get into, or is it a wetland area that periods of inundation, the water comes in quickly but recedes quickly, and therefore there might be wonderful tree cover and no understory, so
Right.
it makes it like an open park. So, you know, we still have topographical features that have a bearing, ravine systems, you know, moderately high sand hill or sand ridges, sinkholes are one. You know, that's a feature. Karst lakes, natural lakes.
Right.
So yeah, we have them here, and they do impact again the use potential and marketability of the property, depending on what they are.
Right. And we certainly have some of that on this beautiful tract of land that
We're
we're
sitting.
sitting
I
on
was going.
today,
I was
so-
just going to say we're sitting right next to a beautiful topographical feature with this river.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, finally, Zach, I just wanted to ask you how timber on a piece of property can affect its value. Radiant's parent company, Rayonier, is a timber company, and we manage a lot of timberland, and so that's certainly something that we focus on a lot. And I just wanted to kind of get your experience with the impact of timber on property value.
That's a great question, and so many, you know, so many characteristics relating to land and acreage and real property vary and are dependent on the end use of or the market for that particular piece of land. And timber is certainly one of those types of issues and characteristics. It can factor in enormously, or it can have little bearing, depending on what the use potential of that property is. And of course, if it's a tract of land that has an ongoing highest and best use of timber production, then it makes a very significant contribution. If it's a property that is transferring for a combination of uses like recreation and rural estate homestead, timber can factor in as a supplement to carrying costs on the property. But then when you get into a situation where you have a residential development tract or a commercial property, by the time it reaches that type of highest and best use, the value of the underlying land is so high that the timber becomes
Right.
a relatively insignificant component. And so, yes, it does factor in, I would say in most instances, in a significant way, but there are examples where it has little bearing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Zach, sure appreciate the time today.
Thank you, my pleasure.
For more tips from Zach, check out our article on rethinkrural.com.